so cute. Look how cute we are.
I know. We almost look like sisters though right now.
Oh, wait, hold on. I can't hear you. Okay, say that again.
I said we almost look like sisters right now.
We do. Amazing. Okay. Oh my gosh, my thing's not staying in my ear. There we go. Are we put together?
Yeah, I think we look baller.
Huh?
I think we look awesome.
Me too. Okay, now we'll start. All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today on Hope Brokers. I have MJ Vogel, author and motivational speaker, with me today. Can I say the name I knew you by? Is that cool?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So I met, I actually know her as Melissa Jackson, and we met a long time ago. I really honestly don't know I want to say like 6, 7, maybe even 8 years ago. We were in the same network marketing groups. I had joined it was a masterminds at the time. It was actually really amazing masterminds because we had a lot of powerhouses in that masterminds. But the very first meeting that I went to, I just want you to know, there were 2 people in that room that strongly impressed me. And it was a room of, I want to say there was at least 20 people there. And again, just powerhouses. I didn't know a lot of people personally in the room. I just knew the caliber of people that we would be working with based on who else was in the room. But I do remember that you had stood out significantly along with Jaron Lisinski. But you stuck out in a room full of men and women because you just commanded the room when you walked in, like you were a powerhouse. I don't know. You just had this confidence, and you just had this like power behind just who you were. You were just you were a force to be reckoned with, and I could clearly see that. And I just want you to know, I don't know why I'm getting so emotional. I just want you to know that that was my very strong impression of you, and that day has always stuck with me. So I hope that you know that you really bring that energy into the room, that you really do display a lot of confidence.
Oh, well, thank you so much. I mean, that's definitely, I consider myself like, I've got the same kind of thought process that I think almost everyone does, where it's like, oh my goodness, right? The fear of imposter syndrome, or the fear of, making sure that you're bringing your best self. So it's always encouraging to hear that kind of feedback, to know that, I'm showing up the way that I want to, and also know that if that perception I'm trying to create to inspire other people is showing up that way. So I super am humbled to hear that. Thank you so much.
Well, and you've done a tremendous amount of growing since that time. So to be that powerful that long ago, and to see how much more you have grown exponentially. I mean, it's a night and day difference, and yet you were still so powerful then, but you're so much more. It's a different kind of, I don't know. You're on your life path, and it's clear, right? You are 100% confident and comfortable in your life purpose and your path. And when somebody is there, you can see it. It exudes in everything, right?
Yeah. Well, and I super appreciate that too, because it's exactly that. It's being on your life path. It's knowing how to pivot, how to take your adversities and your challenges and connect them into your life purpose. So when adversity is knocking, you know who you are and showing up on that. So it's super humbling to hear that. And also, I agree with you. I think a big thing with how people show up is if they're connected to their path, or they feel like they're incongruent and they're connected, or they're connected with who they want to be. So it's a very big difference maker, I'd say.
Yeah, because I feel like when you're connected to who you're coming into, or you are on your life path and life purpose, things become a little bit, it feels effortless. I hate to say that, because you still have your trials and struggles, but the path feels effortless, meaning doors just open, right? When you're fluid and you're in your life purpose and you're open, things just open up. It's crazy. It's crazy. Yes. And it's light, and there's no stress. I don't know. All the limitations and beliefs that we put on ourselves when we're not on our life path, I feel like kind of disappear, because I feel like it's a higher acceptance when we go, this is my purpose.
Yeah.
Melissa, you also had worked on my nonprofit. I'd started a nonprofit after friends son had committed suicide. We started Heart Inspired, named after Nick Hart, who had committed suicide at age 16. And you had served on that board with me. You volunteered your time, which I also feel like says a lot about who you are as a person. What was your drive, or what was your belief system at that time, and why did you feel so passionately? What was it that I guess connected you to my cause?
Yeah, so I'm a very firm believer that, and I've written a poetry book about this as well, but I'm a very firm believer that when adversity hits, you have kind of a fork in the road moment in your life where you can either, rightfully so, go and be the victim of this circumstance, or go and make something beautiful out of the adversity that you're going through. So my connective to your cause was the fact that you've been through a lot of challenges. A lot of the people and the teens that we were interviewing for, the projects that we're putting together had been through their challenges, and there was a decision made on how they were going to take their challenges and turn them into good and positive for the world. So I'm a very firm believer in taking those challenges and then making them into something beautiful for the world. And I've been at the darkest days of my life many, many times where, I just thought, hey, there's no point in continuing to move forward with life. Like, you're just apathetic. You just don't know what you're fighting for. And I think that was a decision, an opportunity for me to really take advantage of living my life purpose and living out loud and making an impact as much as I could.
So let's talk about where this all started, because I know at a very, very young age, you had to learn to be, self-sufficient. You had to learn to be, you're kind of on your own, I feel like, so to speak. Yeah. Do you want to talk about, let's talk about 9 years old when you were self-educated. How was it that it came to be that at 9 years old, you had to take it upon yourself to educate yourself?
Yeah, so it was an interesting thing, and I'm a firm believer in being grateful for the adversities that I've given. So self-educated from the age 9 up, neither one of my parents at that time had graduated high school, and I was homeschooled. So that was a really interesting situation. And the last thing I was taught was how to multiply fractions, and they did the absolute best that they could with what they had, absolutely had their own challenges as well. So namaste to them. But at age 9, the last thing I was taught is how to multiply fractions. And we came from extreme poverty, extreme adversity, and there was no real education. There was no real books. It was just this old GD book that was about 6 years old. And I just started teaching myself there from that GD book, trying to graduate by the time I was 16 years old. And it was honestly one of my biggest insecurities when I started becoming an entrepreneur. One of my biggest, that feeling of imposter syndrome, knowing that I didn't have a traditional education. Like, granted, I've got 2 college degrees since. Imposter syndrome means that you walk into a room, like hypothetically, like the room you're talking about with the mastermind, and you feel like you don't belong. You feel like you're not good enough. You feel like, okay, like everyone says I'm good at XYZ, but if they really knew, where I came from, my background, they would know that I'm a fraud or I don't belong here. So it was a real insecurity of mine, being self-educated from the age 9 up, that I didn't fit in and that my education was lacking. But as years continued to grow, that self-education actually saved my own life. And I would say is probably my biggest, if not my biggest strength.
I saw that, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that. But let's talk about, so it's amazing to me first that a 9-year-old would have the self-awareness to have those kind of goals and visions and that wherewithal to have a life, life purpose or life goals already at such a young age. But at age 15 is kind of when, actually, back to age 9, because you had brought this up in the pre-interview stuff, but you said you actually had an accident at age 9 that triggered something later in life. Yeah. What was it that you're referring to?
So I have a condition called Chiari Malformation that's incurable, and sometimes it can go undetected. So what that is your brain does not physically fit into your skull. Like, your brain is literally, not figuratively, literally not fitting into your skull, so it's herniating into your neck. And the problem with that is, I was born with it, but sometimes it can lay dormant. Sometimes you don't feel symptoms on it. But at age 9, right around this time that I was embarking on the self-education, right as I was trying to, I was hitting that moment of like, oh crap, like The world's not going to be all sunshine and rainbows. Like, you need to either make a decision on if you're going to educate yourself and try to make something out of this. I was right at that pivot moment. And then right around that same time frame, my mother was driving to Blockbuster back where they were around. And we were going through an intersection in downtown Boise, and this truck, big freaking truck, runs a red light, runs right into us and pushes our car all the way across the freaking intersection, like all the way across it. And right on the passenger side, they hit us on the passenger side right where I was sitting. And ever since that moment happened, I had these migraines that no one could explain. Ever since that moment happened, I started struggling with massive dyslexia. Ever since that happened, I was nauseated almost all the time. Everything changed in my body ever since that moment. Now, it took them 16 years to figure out that I needed to get brain surgery. It took them 16 years to figure out what exactly that triggered. But it was right at that moment of 19 years old where everything, my education was dumped upside down. I didn't know that the last thing I was going to be taught was fractions. And I didn't know, like, probably like 2 or 3 months later, that there I was getting a friggin' car accident and having this neurological disorder triggered to the point where nothing would ever be the same ever again.
And then, but that wasn't your first incident. I mean, that's when everything triggered. Sorry, that was your first incident, but then you had something else happen when you were 15.
Yeah, at 15, it was the big fork in the road moment for my life where I was done having a pity party. I was done being pessimistic of life. I was like, I'm going to make something out of myself. I went and got my first job. I was getting very far into actually being able to graduate my GED. And then I got hit by a truck while riding my bike through a store parking lot. To stop by there, and I went flying on it, broke my collarbone, dislocated my shoulder, and it took them 10 years, like literally 10 years, to figure out my collarbone was separated on my right side. Just misdiagnosis over and over again. So I just did the majority of my work left-handed for better half of a decade.
That is insane to me that you did that for that long.
Yeah, it was not fun. I mean, I worked a lot in fast food at that time. So, I mean, I can only imagine what a lot of people thought that were in the fast food environment. So I would just sit here like this, and I would just do everything left-handed as much as I could. I couldn't lift my arm above my head for about a decade. And it really jacked up a lot of things. They didn't know what was happening. I had x-rays after x-rays, and it took them until I was 24 years old. I went and finally saw a shoulder specialist within a matter of seconds. He's like, your collarbone's dislocated, separated, and growing into your AC joint. So we need to cut out your AC joint, and we need to shave down your collarbone. And I could finally move my arm above my head. I was so damn pumped, Tawnia. I'm not even kidding. I was so excited. I was like, yes! I'm like, oh, I can find people now. This is great.
So you had talked about you were kind of in this pity party mode. Tell me about that time in your life when you had this, because I feel like when we go through trials, when we have trauma, when we have obstacles, and there's a place that you get to, and I feel like it's a place where there's times when you're so down and so low that I feel like you're kind of floating and foggy, and you're not kind of really self-aware at all because you're still in trauma mode. But I believe that you get to a place where you snap out of it, and there's a self-awareness of, I now have a choice. I now have a choice to be a victim. Or I have a choice to, if I'm going to live, I'm going to live in joy. I'm going to live in gratitude. I'm going to live in service. I'm going to live in happiness, right? Yeah. So let's talk about, I want to know, at what point in your life did you get to the place where you were at that low? You were feeling sorry for yourself. How did you get there? Where were you at? And what was it? What was the defining moment for you where you literally snapped out of it? Because I know I definitely had one. And I would love to hear about yours.
Yeah, so I don't talk about this super in depth just because I don't want it to, change my future on it. I'm actually very grateful, as terrible as it may sound, for this experience. And I don't want it to be the only thing that people get out of it. So I'll be as general as I can, but hoping that people understand the full message. So at the age of 15, before I got into this car accident where they separated my collarbone and all of that crap, I was on a very dark path where I was not going to live and make through it. I was not. I was in a very, very traumatic situation. I had a lot of adversity, a lot of violence, a lot of challenges, self-educated, eating disorders. I was really in a dark, 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 dark friggin' spot in my life where I was 100% apathetic on if I lived or not. Like, I did not care. I did not care at all. And it was this moment where I unintentionally, because I had a really bad eating disorder, I unintentionally took too many diet pills and overdosed on them. I hadn't ate for probably about a week, and I literally thought that I was going to die. Like, I literally thought I was going to die. I was home alone, and it was at that moment, like, great, 15 years old. I'm sure everyone's had some really crappy decisions that they made at their life at 15. But at that particular moment, I started realizing, like, I had this epiphany. I had this breakthrough where I was like, dude, like, you're not the things that have happened to you. You're not the challenges. You're not the violence. You're not whatever the hell's happened to you. And you have a decision to make right now where you can have a life purpose. You can have a life mission statement that you're going to enter into future as well as this adversity through. What are you going to stand for? And I remember I blacked out on the kitchen floor and I told God, source, power, whatever you want to call it. I was like, if you let me live through today, I promise I'm going to be the best damn version of myself that I possibly can be, regardless of other people's opinions, limitations, or oppression. I understood that hurt people, and that just because other people may be oppressing you, other people may be judging you, just because other people may be doing some bad things or what have you to you, and you're going through a hard time, that does not mean you need to become the person that hurt you. So it was that particular moment when I hit that fork in the road where, thankfully, obviously, I woke up and I started having this life mission statement that I attacked everything with. That's how I attacked the car accident while being, left-handed basically for a friggin' decade, is I was like, okay, this is your life mission statement. You woke up. Now, what the hell are you going to do with it? And it was that real snap out of it moment that made me realize, like, hey, this is your reawakening. This is your opportunity to make something great out of your challenge. And I think a lot of times people may be abusers, people may be suppressors because they were hurt themselves as well. And maybe, just maybe, they have not made the right decision to make something beautiful out of it. So they become the person that hurt them. And I was going on that dark route myself in an apathetic way of just abusing myself, really.
Yeah. And then you went on to kill it. Like, you were working 4 jobs, getting yourself through college. Tell me about that time in your life.
Yeah, so that was the big fork in the road moment, was, that freaking life mission statement. So I went out viciously attacked crops. So I went and I started doing everything, working my late night job, educating myself. And then I worked up to 4 jobs, putting myself through college while building my first business. And I literally did nothing, Tawnia, besides barely sleep. That was it.
Sounds like it. I don't know how you do it.
And, I was grinding for a couple different reasons. One of them being the fact that I really meant it with that life mission statement. A lot of times people think that, success or transformation is this big, long process. It's not. It's a decision, it's a declaration, and it's a commitment. So once that purpose was laid, I started viciously attacking everything that scared the crap out of me and going and becoming the best version of myself. But also, with all these hours, all these jobs I was working, I knew that I was coming from a challenging education. I knew I was coming from a challenging background. I knew that I had no money, and I knew that there was nothing going to be made for myself unless I made it myself. But I also knew that my body was failing me. I never knew why. I never knew why that car accident at 9 years old was terrible. I never knew why I was in and out of the hospital all the time. I never knew why they thought I was having kidney failure when my back was literally just having bruises and welts right where my kidneys were. I never knew why, if you just hugged me, my entire spine would crack. I did not know why my body was deteriorating. I did not know why the doctors were telling me I'd be paralyzed by the time I was 30. But what I did know is I had a limited time, a limited opportunity, a limited window to get as much crap done as I possibly could. So I no longer had to work physical labor because I knew my body would be able to do it. I couldn't wait tables very much longer, and I had to get into something that was using my mind versus my body.
So then at age 25, this is what you were talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
At age 25, this is when something happens. You're at a doctor's office, right? And then
Yeah.
you all of a sudden experience.
Yeah. So at 24, they did the shoulder surgery and they're like, hey, you got a dislocated collarbone and you need to get shoulder surgery. And I had a follow-up appointment with it. And I was like, hey, my shoulder's great, but you guys told me this was going to help my migraines and it didn't. My head still hurts. I'm having a hard time remembering how to get home. My right hand, which I'm right-handed, was turning into a claw. And my right foot, I was like freaking walking on it barely. Like I might as well not even had a right foot. It was like turning into a pirate club. Like it was terrible. And I'm like, something is wrong here. And at that point, they did a neck MRI and found out that I had the Chiari malformation. They found out that my brain was herniated into my neck. And as they did that, they started doing nerve testing. They started doing reflex testing. And I'll never, ever forget the horror that was on my mother's face, as well as I imagine my own face. When we went into this appointment together, once they found this, all of a sudden we're there booking this appointment with this neurosurgeon, and he's looking at this MRI because my brain doesn't fit into my skull, and he's being super dismissive because I'm young and I looked fine and all of this crap, and he's not really taking me seriously when I'm telling him I don't know how to get home sometimes. In my right hand, I'm losing mobility and I'm just randomly dropping things. And he starts doing this nerve testing, and the whole morale switches like this, and his face just looks terrified. He's like, did you have a stroke? He's like, you show the signs of somebody who had a stroke. Did you have a stroke? When did you have a stroke? And I showed the signs, and we still don't know to this day if I had a spontaneous stroke that they were not aware of because of the nerve damage, because of the neurological damage that was caused by this. And everything changed massively from that moment on. 25 years old, I'm sitting there getting questioned on if I had a stroke unknowingly, and the neurosurgeon is freaking terrified and starts ordering a bunch of additional brain scans to try to figure out what the hell is going on and why this 24 or 25-year-old woman is sitting in this freaking office with all the symptoms of someone who had a stroke.
Is this at that time when you had to have your first surgery? It's your mom, your hairs and braids. Yeah. Is that your first surgery?
So that was about 4 months after I got diagnosed, because we had to find a neurosurgeon ASAP, and they were terrified to operate on me because there was a gal that just passed away at 19 years old from the same surgery. But yeah, that was the day of the surgery where I had to put my hair in braids. They shaved the top part of my head about halfway through. So they had to physically go in there and remove the back part of my skull, but there's still a big hole there. And then shave off the scar tissue from every single time my brain was beating into my skull.
That's so crazy. Okay, let's see. I'm trying to get back to, I was going to try to find another picture. But then so how long after that did you have the second surgery?
So that surgery helped a lot of things, but within about a year-long period, they wanted to do another brain surgery on me where they wanted to cauterize or potentially remove the back part of my brain.
Yeah.
And it was about a year after that we started doing alternative surgeries for that, because that had a really high probability of fatality. And we had about 11 additional surgeries within a year-long period.
Okay, so sorry, I didn't want to skip over that, because that's the part that I missed, is you were actually scheduled for a second surgery. Mm-hmm. But your self-education, your research, your knowledge that you went out and found yourself actually saved your life. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the surgery they wanted to do, because the first brain surgery didn't fix all the issues, which the first brain surgery did help out a lot, is they wanted to go in there and remove or potentially cauterize the back part of my brain. And something about me, something did not feel right. Like something felt off. And something just told me that was not the right surgery to do. So I started looking into a lot of the resources within Facebook groups, within people within the Chiari community, and doing a lot of research. I stumbled across this video from one of the top hospitals in the entire United States that talks about the connection between leaking spinal fluid and Chiari malformation. And what turned out to be the truth for me was that the first brain surgery was the right thing to do. The second brain surgery would have not treated the right issue and probably would have killed me. What they needed to do was different surgeries where they injected blood and glue into your spinal cord to help with the brain issue, versus going in there and cauterizing the back part of the brain. And it came from complete self-education and accessibility to online resources that helped me with connecting this with this doctor, because there's only 3 of them in the United States, or at least there was at that particular time, to figure out that the surgery I was going to do was not the right one for me to do.
So then, Melissa, how long after that was it that you had to undergo, like, there was a 2-year period of time when you underwent 12 surgeries. How long after that second surgery, you know, the potential surgery that you were able to bypass on, how long after that did you undergo these other 12 surgeries? And what was it that they were struggling with? Was there fluid on your brain, or what?
So the first brain surgery is May 5th of 2015. My last surgery for the spinal fluid leaks was January 2017. So between May 5th of 2015 to January of 2017, there was a combination of 12 surgeries altogether, including the brain surgery. And the problem with it was, and I try to keep this really simple, because I know when I was researching, it was extremely confusing, but your spinal cord that goes throughout your body has a wrapping on it that's called the dura. That dura, if that is leaking, because you have minor little tears in it, that's going to be leaking the fluid that's actually in your skull, holding your brain up. So what they needed to go in and do is they had to go and inject blood and glue into your spinal cord to try to seal those holes throughout your spinal cord so you were not leaking fluid throughout your body. So that's what they had to do. And it was a very terrible surgery. A lot of times I talk to people, they think that the brain surgery was the most painful. The brain surgery was not the most painful. The spinal fluid leak surgery, is, at least from my experience, was so painful because they couldn't give you any painkiller. They couldn't knock you out or anything, because they had to keep you awake. And you had to tell them when the pain got physically unbearable, because if it didn't, then you wasted your time and your money, and they're very risky surgeries, so they didn't want to do an extreme amount. If it didn't get to physically unbearable, it didn't work. If it got past physically unbearable, you could suffer from paralysis. So you had to be awake, alive, and judging the situation on if it got to the point where you felt like you were going to die, because if it didn't, then the surgery didn't work.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yeah,
like, that's a lot of pressure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was not fun at all.
And it would be scary. I feel like I knew you at that time, right?
Oh, yeah.
Was that right before you guys lost everything?
Yeah, it was right before. That was in 2017. So even after all those surgeries, I was still messed up physically. I was a lot better off, but I still was blacking out every 3 hours. So we still had to give up everything economically, the house, the car, everything, because surgeries are expensive as hell, especially if you're going to another state to get them. And I ended up having to do so because the people that were doing the procedures here were not educated on the matter. Yeah. So, I mean, after all those surgeries, I mean, I was trying to work. I was working as much as I could in another state while blacking out consistently. So I was grinding as much as I could to keep the wheels on the bus, but it was not enough. So after all those surgeries, I go back home and there's still something wrong. There's still something wrong at C3 in my neck. And I reach out to the doctor and I tell him, hey, I think you might consider doing one last procedure at C3. And he was like, I'm sorry, but no. He's like, I agree with you. There's something going on there, but that is not like your regular procedure. If you do that, you're probably not going to make it, or you're going to be paralyzed. The risk is much higher when you go up there. So what I had was this opportunity. I had this decision, right? That fork in the road moment where it was like, okay, are you going to just be a victim and stay in bed for the rest of your life and pull the plug on all your goals and all your dreams? Or are you going to try to do something to make something out of the situation? So it was that particular moment where I realized, like, hey, getting on disability, at least for me, was not an option. I'd have to move back in with my parents. And I just was not there, or I wasn't ready to make that commitment. Namaste to those that do. No judgment. It just was not the right decision for me. And then I was like, okay, well, I need to make a different decision. If that's not the option, what is the option? I can't just lay here and feel bad for myself the entire time. So what I started doing is I started realizing that, yes, I wanted to commit and change my life. Yes, I wanted to build something new. Yes, I wanted to do something, but it was not going to be an overnight process, because I would try to get up. I would try to fix my entire house. It was a mess. I'd try to grow my business. It was a mess. And then I'd black out and then be bedridden for like 3 or 4 days. So what I started doing is I started saying, okay, pick one thing that's going to change your life. What's one habit? What's one system that you can do to focus on this week that's going to help you? And then what I started doing is I started picking a habit a week, every single week. And I did this for 2 years straight, between 2017 to 2019. I picked a habit a week and I compounded them week by week to try to build a new version of myself.
When I talk about my trauma and my healing, I think that that's really powerful, because I talk about a lot about being in the present and about handling life in moments. And that is part of it, is creating new habits, right? In this moment, what can I do to change the course of the same stagnant situation that I'm in, right?
Yeah.
So what's that one thing that I can add to my life that's going to take me in a little bit of a different direction, right? Yeah. It's baby steps. It's those little things that add up over time. Mm-hmm. So for me, in my trauma and in my healing, in order for me to get out of my funk and off the couch or out of my bed, my first step was to get to the bathtub. And now I tell everybody I'm a mermaid. I soak in the bath for an extremely long time every single day, but it's my time. It's my meditation. It's my me time. It's my music time. Like it's the best time of the day for me, because it's the time I get right with my head. But that was the point, right? Is that you have to do things in your life if you want to change your situation and your perspective and your joy and your happiness. You have to do the things that are going to create a more positive situation going forward. And those are the small habits. And I love that you say that there was one new one that you were going to work on every week. So go ahead. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think people need to hear that. You have to create habits at whatever pace you need to.
Yeah. And I'll say two things with that to, your point. It's not going to be an overnight process. It's not. And a lot of times when people go through trauma, they're too busy trying to be who they were before the trauma hit. And I kept trying to go back to, like, I was self-identifying with that person, like, hey, I worked 4 jobs and put myself through college. And wow, my collarbone is dislocated. Like, what is this crap? Why are you not able to get out of bed? But so many times we're trying to be who we were before the trauma hit. And what I realized was, like, you cannot go back to that person. You got to build a new version of yourself.
Don't you feel like too, Melissa? Do you feel like you mourn the loss of that old person as well? I mean, I know I did with the loss of a child, because I couldn't ever go back to that person. Yeah. But I wonder, in your trauma, do you feel like you kind of went through a mourning process of the loss of who you were prior to these limitations and surgeries?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Because I would consider myself to be fiercely independent. So when you're fiercely independent and you're not able to freaking, like, barely get out of bed, like, that's a whole world upside down. When you're fiercely independent, where you're able to work 4 jobs and put yourself through college, but then you're like, hey, I can't even be upright and clean my damn kitchen without being bedridden for 3 freaking hours for like 3 days. That's a terrible, terrible experience. What I started realizing was, once I got done mourning that version of myself and realizing that I can't go back to who I was then, I started realizing who I was becoming, that this person, this trauma actually made me stronger if I could tap into the new skill set that it was helping. And, one thing I want to say too, is we're talking about habit implementation. This wasn't all, a Disney friggin' movie. It wasn't, hey, I'm going to implement a habit a week and my life's going to change. I still lost everything. We still had to give up the house. We still had to, freaking give up the cars. We still lost everything economically. It's not always going to be a happy ending immediately. And sometimes I feel like people that do habit implementation or try to transform their life, they get pissed, they get resentful, because they don't think that they're getting the ending that they want. And that's a lot of times because the ending hasn't arrived and you haven't arrived at that ending. So you got to go through and understand the adversities that keep coming, even if you're doing all the right things.
I do think there's something to be said about the small, simple things that add up over time, though, right? As we make those positive progressions in the right direction, we know that the impact is going to be positive over time, no matter what, even during the trials and lows in those moments, because we're still going in a positive direction over time, that is going to add up, right?
Yes, absolutely. And that's building the new version of yourself. That's, building the new, stronger you by those small incremental decisions. And doing a commitment, like a habit a week, hypothetically, or a habit a month, or whatever it is, that's huge for your self-confidence as you're going through an adversity, because you realize, like, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on, but I'm building the new me. And also I can believe in myself to follow through with these new things that are building the new version of myself. A lot of times we don't want to try new things. We don't want to go and get new habits. We don't want to do something that's out of our comfort zone. And if you do that, you start building the new version of yourself. It's the biggest self-confidence builder that I think anyone could do.
in talking about those things that build up and those positive mindsets and those creating new habits, and over time it changing your life, something happens in your own personal life, Melissa. You start seeing what happened within your own personal life, because this is where success shows up. This is where your life starts really changing. This is where the new MJ Vogel starts coming out, right? This is your transformation. This is where your life purpose, this is where you start to shine. Do you want to talk about those now that you've changed your life habits and you're doing those small, simple things, and you're creating, different things in your life to create better circumstances? Let's talk about how that impacts you financially, emotionally, physically, personally, spiritually.
Well, and I would just say, I'm so damn grateful for the death of who I used to be, because the death of who I used to be created the ability for me to experience what I'm experiencing now, which is unity, connection with other people, an opportunity to be vulnerable with other people. Like, this has opened up so many doors and windows to what would have never been possible if I just would have stayed on the path of what I was doing. So ever since then, I've been able to release multiple books. I've been able to release multiple programs. I've been able to share the stage with literally like the founder of freaking Destiny's Child. And I am the biggest freaking Beyonce fan ever. And it's been a complete world upside down. But the big thing that I realized with all of this, like, awesomeness, is the fact that I can build the person that I want to be that can accomplish that. A lot of times when we're going through adversities, we're like, hey, this crap's happening to me. And I was like, yeah, this crap's happening, but what can I build out of this? So I'm really freaking humbled, honestly, and a little bit freaked out, if I'm honest, about what I've been able to build since that, by small incremental habits, small incremental changes, to be able to get up on the stage with people like that, to be able to help people overcome chronic illness, and then to be able to do a 100-mile bike race last year with still chronic illness. My brain still doesn't fit into my skull. That didn't go away. It's just a matter of, I figured out ways to build around it to try to create as much good as I possibly could around the adversity.
Conquering the crisis. What's that?
So that was an online summit that I did with Matthew Knowles, Tim Story, Brad Lee was on there as well. So that was my first big conference that I was able to speak at, which was completely a humbling experience about overcoming adversities, habit implementation, when COVID first hit, and helping people try to overcome that challenge.
That's really, really awesome. So I just shared the picture of you right there on the front. Look at you, girlfriend. Oh, this is your before. Oh, where's your after?
So you actually took those photos of me. I don't know.
I did. That was actually at my house. I was on my own weight loss journey.
Yeah, I think I was about 176 then. I had, that was like right around the time I was no longer becoming bedridden, right around the time I started doing the habit implementation and still trying to build some type of muscle mass and some type of strength. Because when you're bedridden for 2 years, you lose a lot of muscle mass, obviously.
Yeah, because you're not mobile.
Yeah.
So there you are. Let's see if I can screen share this one. Get Melissa, Miss Hottie, Samadhi. You look good, girl.
Oh, I can't see it yet.
Yep, we're getting there. Right there. Bam.
Yeah.
Bam.
So that was probably
wow.
Yeah, it was probably a year and a half ago. I've put on probably about 20 pounds of muscle since that picture.
Really? And what are you doing to do that?
So it was very, very difficult to do that around chronic illness. So I had to really, what I started doing is Flare Up Friday, where I'd go and I would lift weights in a particular area that I knew was going to make me bedridden for 2 days. And then I would work out, lift those weights, and then go back to it again on Friday until I started building the muscle mass to be able to actually get the reps up higher. So I think a lot of people may see me lose a lot of weight or build a lot of muscle mass. They don't understand that this literally is the hardest thing that I've done, is put on muscle mass, because it a lot of times leaves me to be bedridden, where I'm going to the hospital, getting injections put in me to try to calm down the migraines. But it's a necessary evil because it helps and combats the flare-up days and makes it so I have less chronic illness days.
You're doing your swimming suit competition, and when is that? When's that coming up?
June 5th. So I know, right? I'm like, holy shit, oh my God. So we'll see how that
That's
goes.
my nephew's birthday.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah.
Wow. I have no intentions in winning. Like I did the first challenge I did was I auditioned for The Voice. I had no intentions in winning The Voice. Like, I mean, I know you and I have done karaoke. I have no false perception though that I'm gonna be the next friggin' Michelle. Like,
Wait, you actually sound really good. I on the other hand don't, but you sound good, and that's awesome that you actually tried out for The Voice, because I want to talk about that.
But I mean, I like to sing, but I had no intentions that I was going to go and be the next Christina Aguilera. So it was like, dude, what terrifies me? Like going into a state and singing in front of a bunch of strangers with with karaoke, at least you get some wine, you know, yeah. at least calming your nerves down a little bit.
You can do it a couple shots in and feel pretty good about it.
Exactly.
You think you sound better than you are.
Yeah, and you think you sound great. But it was a real big conquer the fear thing. So that was one of the first challenges I did. And then I started learning how to swim the next year. And then I started doing the 100-mile bike race. And then, you know, this bikini competition. I try to pick something that challenges who I am, because the big thing is, like I said, my body got weak, yes, but my mindset got weak. That's what led me to go down such a dark rabbit hole. That's what led me to be the victim a lot of this circumstances. I allowed my mindset to get weak. And I believe that when you go through adversity, you have to have mental toughness. You have to have the ability to believe in yourself. And if you live in a soft, comfortable freaking area, you're not going to be pushing yourself, and you're going to lose that edge. And I lost that edge when I quit my last night job. I lost that edge as I was beginning to get settled in life. And that's what made this brain surgery and all of these things so difficult, is because I was no longer putting myself through things that developed mental toughness to be able to believe in myself. And that's what caused me to lose myself very, very intensely during all those challenges.
So how do you reel it back in when you feel like you lose yourself?
I would go and I would do a couple things. One, I would realize, like, hey, if you're going through something, like, you're not going to be who you were before you went through it. Like, namaste to that. People are like, hey, I want to go back to 2019. It's not going to happen. Good news is actually the 2020 version of you is going to get you through 2021. If 2019 version of yourself went through 2021 right now, it'd be a complete shit show. Because you develop a lot of skill set. You develop a lot of things through turmoil. But I would also say, go out there and find yourself through challenges. We live in a very comfortable freaking world right now where everyone's talking about just self-love. Everyone's just talking about going and being comfortable. And yeah, self-love is important. One of my favorite Will Smith quotes is, he says, self-love is self-discipline. Sometimes you have to love yourself by doing crap that is completely out of your comfort zone to show yourself what you're capable of, who you are authentically, not who you think you are, like who you really are, and then show up for yourself. And that means doing crap that terrifies you, in my opinion.
I think self-love looks like work. I think self-love is a lot of work. Self-love is awareness. It's a commitment to yourself to, you know, deprogram all of the broken records that are playing in your head. It's an opportunity to, you know, be aware of what triggers you, be aware of what offends you, so that you can fix those triggers and those offensive feelings. And when you can do that, you get to a place of happiness. When you start to heal, when you work on yourself and you focus on correcting the triggers and healing the offensiveness of things, that to me is self-love. Because you find a place of peace and happiness and euphoria that is absolutely amazing. Like, I feel like I'm living my best life right now. I'm not saying I'm perfect, and not saying that I don't have more growing to do, and not saying that I still don't have offensivenesses and triggers. But as they come up and I work through them, and I am committed to working through them in those moments, you know, and fixing the behaviors and fixing the mind processes, life is so much better. I am happy. I am happy. There's so much freedom and liberty into self-awareness and self-care, but self-love is work. It's work to work on yourself to get to yourself to a place of peace.
Yeah. And it's painful as hell to do that. And I know you know that, but a lot of times it's so painful to go back through and say, hey, where's this trigger coming from? What's my belief system? Where did this come up? How am I really showing up in life? Like, that self-work is so ungodly painful to do. And you have to understand that there's a love aspect of yourself of like, hey, I love you enough that I'm going to put myself through that. Like, I know you've got kids, like you love your kids enough to have a tough conversation with them hypothetically and say, hey, you need to do your damn schoolwork, or, you know, you need to not eat Cheetos and friggin' pizza every day. Like, that is the tough love conversation. And we live in such a soft world right now. You'll see David Goggins' book right above my head. I love that friggin' book, and I love his philosophy. We live in such a soft world right now where everyone's like, oh, hey, self-love is just, you know, buying yourself all the purses that you want and going home and laying down and watching Netflix. Like, no, that's not self-love. Self-love is going to doing the crap that you know you need to do to make your life better. And it's going to hurt like hell. But we get to decide what's going to hurt. Do you want the short-term hurt where it may be intense as hell, like going in and reprogramming your entire mind and conquering your victim mindset? Or do you want the tough challenge long-term wise? It's going to hurt way the hell more of not doing that work. And it's very painful work to do. I honestly would say was my favorite parts of being bedridden is I got very heavy into self-love and self-meditation and going in and pulling the crappy weeds that were in my mind and trying to reprogram my mindset. And it was painful as hell, but I wouldn't trade it for the world.
I remember during my own self-love journey, when I shaved my head, I remember first, I remember understanding being 40 years old, laying in bed thinking, I'm 40 years old and I really honestly don't love myself. I don't find worth with myself. And I knew in that moment, it's funny because I feel like we think a lot alike, meaning that we are independent as hell. We are self-sufficient. We are going to figure out, you know, we're going to figure out how to be the best version of ourselves. However it takes to get there the quickest, probably the most painful way, but the fastest with the most exponential growth. I feel like that's you and me. Mm-hmm. So I'm laying in bed and I'm thinking, I'm going to have to, if I'm going to grow exponentially and figure out how to love myself, I'm going to have to take away everything that I'm hiding behind, which was my extensions. It was my fake eyelashes. It was my makeup. It was my jewelry. It was my cute clothes. And I did. I remember I posted on Facebook that I was doing it. And the reason I did that was very intentional because I knew I was going to back out. I knew if I didn't commit to it, I was going to back out. Right. Yeah. It was a big deal. I was getting ready to shave my freaking head. Yeah. And I laid in bed that night and I have never sweat so bad in my whole entire, see me shaking. My knee is like, I'm going back to that moment. But I was laying in bed and I was so scared because I knew what the next 6 months to year looked like. It looked like ugly. It looked like a lot of emotion. It looked like a guy was never going to look at me again. You know what I mean? Like I was single and I wanted to date and I knew that was not going to be in the cards for me because I was just getting ready to like get the most authentic, raw and real as possible. And it wasn't going to be pretty. And that night I sweat so bad that my sheets were sopping wet. My hair was sopping wet. I'm not even kidding you. Like this was traumatic for me. Yeah. This was extremely traumatic, but I knew 100% that it was going to take me bearing everything in order for me to get really real with myself and be able to look at myself in the mirror with no makeup on, with no hair extensions, without eyelashes, and learn how to love myself and learn how to look at myself and go, you are so pretty and you're brave and you're wonderful and you're beautiful and you're amazing. And I didn't have that relationship with myself, but I knew that was what it was going to take. And I did. And I shaved my head and there was the most exponential growth ever. But you have to be able to be self-aware and say, what is it going to take? And then how uncomfortable am I going to have to get? Because we know that the more uncomfortable we get, the more the exponential growth is, right? Yeah. Oh, at least I feel that. I feel like there's adversity, right? On the opposite side of extreme pain, which I experienced with the loss of my son, there is extreme euphoria. I experience euphoria every day. And I know it's because my self-love, my self-care, my healing, my joy. And now because I've experienced the extreme pain, I now get to experience the extreme joy. So it's amazing. Absolutely. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. God, that's so good and so relevant. And we all have our own you
Yeah.
know.
I love it because I remember watching you do that, and I'm like, dude, she is freaking like this is. It's like that fork in the road, like I talked about earlier. You know, you were like, hey, I'm going to. This is non-negotiable in my life. I'm going to love myself, and I'm going to have to be hella uncomfortable to do it. And that's a
Right.
huge mental toughness challenge. Like the barriers that you break through as a woman doing that, like shaving your head as a business professional, and just being so vulnerable. Like, damn.
I got kicked out of a manager group. I was in a manager group with a big direct sales company. I was the first ambassador in the United States to be part of this management group. And the day after I shaved my head, I was kicked out of that Facebook group. I was completely blocked. No conversation, no nothing. Like they just thought I'd gone like that crazy. In fact, they weren't the only ones. I mean, if you watched it live, you would have saw that there was many comments. You know, there's people that were like freaking out. My cousin Megan was like, "Oh my gosh, don't shave your head. It's okay. Call me. We need to talk." My dad wouldn't watch it. It's like, Dad, if you knew my heart, you would know. And it was what was so telling to me is that the people who knew me the most were the ones that were the most supportive. They were the ones that showed up at my door. They were the ones that shaved their head with me. They were the ones that brought me, you know, the headdresses, and, you know, the people, they were the supportive ones. They were the ones that were encouraging me and loving me on my journey. And the people that didn't know my heart, I think, were scared and didn't want to watch the video and wanted to be afraid for my mental health. But I will tell you, I had to go through that to handle talent death. The person that I became in that process very much was a huge integral part of my healing and the loss of talent.
Going through all of those judgments is extreme yourself as well is extremely empowering for maybe women today as well that would feel judged, would feel like people are questioning their sanity and all of this stuff for really what was an intense mental toughness challenge is the way I perceive what you're going through of like, hey, I'm going to love myself. I'm doing this for me because you are breaking out of the norms. I would say you've experienced that on a different scale, but also in your own different life where I find it to be very empowering. I don't the fact that you also did it yourself and probably inspired people further to not fit within that norm of what society tells you you can and cannot do, and what commitments you want to make to yourself and how you want to change your life and how you want to love yourself is got to be extremely empowering and probably have a bigger ripple effect on you than you're aware of for leading by example of like, hey, I'm going to love myself regardless to all of this, regardless to everyone trying to put me in their box. I'm going to be me. And I mean, I didn't struggle through that exact adversity the way that you did, but I personally, when I watched that, I knew you, I knew your heart, I knew what you were doing, and it really irritated me, everyone in the comment section. Was like, dude, this is badass. Like, this is showing up authentically for yourself.
I will say I had a lot more support, though. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
I will say I had a lot more support than I had negative comments. In fact, I had barely any, and they weren't really even negative. It's just the people. There were some people that really were concerned about my well-being. But I would say for the most part, that is where a lot of people on this journey joined me. That's where a lot of my tribe, the people that I call my tribe, my core tribe, they started with me when I shaved my head, and they've been here for me during Talon's death and through all of my successes and my failures and all of those things as well. So it's been nice. Melissa, what is something that I guess the biggest epiphany, or what would you say at the end of the day to anybody that is struggling with, maybe they're in a bad place. They feel like they are just struggling through life. They don't know if there is a light at the end of the tunnel. They don't know, they're at a place of despair and hopelessness. We've been there where maybe they've lost everything too. Maybe they've gone through surgery after surgery after surgery after surgery, and they feel like, when is this going to end? When is it going to stop? When does things get better? What would you tell somebody? What would be the the best advice you can give to somebody that really is struggling, maybe with physical and mental and emotional pain, and just doesn't know how to hang on, because it's so overwhelming to think about, going through life dealing with chronic pain for the rest of your life?
I would say that it's very important to understand that you're not the only one going through the challenges that you may go through in a different fashion. One of my favorite sayings is that depression creates a false sense of isolation. And that's how depression thrives. It makes you think you are the only person that's felt that way. It makes you think you are the only person that's gone through an adversity like that you're the only person that is suffering. And if you can realize that that's what depression thrives off of, and that's how depression is created, it's extremely empowering to understand that that is completely false. Every single person has gone through suffering, challenges, whatever it is. It may show up in a different manner, but every single person has. So once someone can realize that, it helps diffuse the shame, the guilt that comes associated with going through trauma, and then you can begin the healing process. And then after that realization, I would encourage people to ask themselves, what do they want to model? Do you want to model, is your life mission statement, your life purpose, that when adversity punches you in the face, you lay down and just take it? Or do you want to model what it's like to get the hell up and make something beautiful out of it? We get to decide how we react to the trauma we're going through. And the people that we look up to, the people that are world changers, the people that are big freaking influencers, the people that are absolutely changing the freaking world are those that make the decision intentionally to do so, that they're going to react to what they're going through and use it as a positive light to give back to the world. I'm a very, very firm believer in repurposing adversities for good as your biggest gift to yourself as well as the world. So step number one, realize you're not the only one that's felt that way. And then step number two, ask yourself, what do you want to do with the adversities that you were blessed with? Do you want to be a victim? Do you want that to be your legacy? Do you want to inspire other people going through what you've gone through to just lay down and take it? Or do you want to inspire them to get up and make something out of it?
And I really do feel like, we're here to inspire people. I think all of us are here to inspire and uplift people. I don't think, any one of us is more special than the other. I think we all are put through trials so that when somebody else needs hope, somebody else needs light, that you can say, I've been there and I'm happy and I find joy every day. And there is life after complete despair. There is joy, there is happiness, and there is hope. So, Melissa, thank you so much for MJ. MJ, thank you so much for coming on. Sorry, I'll get used to it. It's weird. I know you're Melissa. But thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time. I love watching your journey. I think you are an amazing woman. You're a powerhouse, and I can't wait to see where else you go. I mean, the sky's the limit, right?
Well, thank you. I'm super excited. I think it's going to be really great. I just want to make as much of an impact as much as I can for as long as I've got. So we'll see how it ends, but it's going to be pretty intense. I'm going to have fun with it.
Well, thank you for joining us, and I appreciate you being a broker of hope. And you have a good rest of your day, Melissa. We'll talk to you soon.
Talk soon. Bye.
Bye, honey.